And we are live. Welcome again to the show, Find Flow. I'm joined today by my gracious guest, Angie. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Yeah,
Had to
okay.
do some weird things today, but everything is settled finally. So glad to be
All good.
here.
Happy to have you. Honestly, I've been excited, looking forward to this for a while. I did a deep dive into your Instagram and like just to kind of gather some of the questions. So
Oh
yeah,
no.
I'm excited. No, it's all good stuff. It's all good stuff. No worries, no worries. First, I guess walk me through your movement journey, because that's initially what drove my attention to you first. Like you do a lot of stuff. You do, like, you got the capoeira going on, you're a contortionist, so you're bending yourself into all kinds of pretzels and stuff. You got the yoga, the dancing. So like
hmm
walk me through your journey. Like what was like your movement journey? Like what did you first start in basically?
Um. Well, I don't. I mean, I didn't start. Let me see. Gosh, I don't know. I wasn't into like dance classes when I was a kid, but we did like
Hmm.
um the occasional uh like hey, we're going to do this church event, so now everybody's
Hmm.
going to learn this choreography, and we would get together with all of the kids in my congregation and we would do that sort of thing. So I wasn't unfamiliar with movement. But I would say that it really began when I started working out after I had my son.
Hmm.
My dad is really into fitness and always has been. He's always been into like bodybuilding and things like that. But for the life of me, I couldn't get into it because he was always suggesting that we run track or do weights, and it was not my thing. It was not my sister's thing. So he kind of did his own thing, um,
Hmm.
all the way up until after I had my son. And I was looking for something to do. And so we went to a Zumba class, my sister and I, and we only stayed for about 20 minutes because I was so out of breath I couldn't hang.
Yeah.
but but I was having so much fun. I think I probably looked like a complete idiot to the teacher because I was just standing there with like this giant smile on my face. I was so, I
Hmm.
mean, completely entranced by the music and the energy that was in that room. And so I would say that's my first taste of what it was
Hmm.
to experience that kind of energy.
Hmm.
I grew up religious. I grew up Mormon. I'm not Mormon anymore, but like
Hmm.
it's you don't get a whole lot of that. You know, we don't go clubbing or anything when we get older, and so I'd never
Hmm.
experienced that kind of group energy where it was this hive mind thing
Hmm.
until we went there. And so I decided after maybe a year of doing that that I would get
Hmm.
certified. And um, and so I did. My sister and I both did. And at the same time, I had started going to yoga classes. And
Hmm.
just like many people, kind of started dipping my toes into anything that I could.
Hmm.
Um, and from there, it was all, kind of history. I
Hmm.
became obsessed with exploring these new movements, obsessed with exploring this energy that I felt but I didn't have
Hmm.
language for, and um, went into a bunch of different formats. I tried cycle, I tried boot camp, and tried all sorts of different things. Capoeira, I started much earlier, like 15. I
Hmm.
was about 15, but I wasn't able to take that consistently because we couldn't
Hmm.
afford classes at the time. So I would go with my friends occasionally to their open circles where they play games and stuff like that and just join in the
Yeah.
music. Um, so yeah, I guess that's like in a nutshell
Yeah.
how it went down.
That's that's awesome. And then like what drove you into like getting into like the contortionists? Like
Oh, that's been a long time dream.
yeah?
I saw the circus which I don't know why they did this. My parents don't like the circus, but they took us. And that's
Mhm.
where I saw contortion for the first time. And I think I might have been
Mhm.
around 8 or 9. um, Seeing that for the first time and decided that yoga was kind of the closest thing that I could do,
Mhm.
because we were in Utah and there wasn't like a giant circus community there. So that was
Yeah.
the nearest I could get. But I didn't start actually training that until maybe the tail end of 2017 or beginning of 2018. I can't remember.
Oh wow. So
Hmm.
so recently then.
Pretty recently, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. Cause like you're like dope at it, man. Like I always see you in like these weird posts, like or like not. So I shouldn't say weird, but like they're
No,
always
you could
like
say it. It's weird.
like I'll be there to like I'll have to do this with my phone. I'll be like, what kind of pose is that? Like it always catches me off guard, and I'm like, wow, that's impressive for like only doing it a short time. Like that's nuts.
Yeah,
That's
thank you.
crazy.
It's been a long journey. It's interesting because I started, like I said, yoga was kind of my gateway because I didn't
Yeah.
think that it was going to be available to me. Um,
Hmm.
and that I think gave me a really good, solid background understanding of like how to fire, um, like your internal, like your Kegel muscles, things like that,
Hmm.
and your
Yeah.
deep abdomen, understanding how to pull that up when
Hmm.
necessary. And also
Yeah.
like a really good understanding of the shoulders and how they operate.
Mm.
So
And with
yeah,
contortion, with what's the correct terminology? Like contortionist, contortion,
yeah,
like
contortionist.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
So are you self-taught or did you go like is there classes that you go to take to learn how to do that or
I started kind of trying to figure my own way through it. What I
hmm.
ended up doing was exploiting a lot of the natural flexibility that I had. Um,
Okay.
I'd learned uh, through that process, and I was just getting
Hmm.
injured. And I was doing a lot of like yoga where I would walk away, and days later I would still be aching in my back. But I thought that
Oh wow. Yeah.
that just came with the territory.
Hmm.
I didn't know any better, so I was just exploiting the natural flexibility that I had. And after
Hmm.
you have kids, that relaxin, that hormone that makes it possible to have kids,
Hmm.
it doesn't like disappear. It just,
Yeah.
you just continue to get more and more flexible. And I didn't know that. So I was
Ah, I
trying
didn't
to
know
learn
that either.
online.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know until
Yeah.
someone told me.
Hmm.
Um, but I was learning online on my own, looking at tutorials and seeing if I could figure out the mechanics of it.
Hmm.
And that was maybe 2 years or something like that, just trying to figure out online, which is not the
Hmm.
best. I don't recommend doing that.
Hmm.
Uh, and then later I found this wonderful coach. His name is Micah. He operates out of LA, I think now. But I appreciated his approach because he was a dancer and a gymnast growing up, and he had an injury, background. Like he was familiar
Hmm.
with what it was to be injured and then come back, and I really wanted
Hmm.
that. And so I started working with him first, and that was a great experience.
Hmm. Wow, that's
Yeah.
awesome. That I like
Mhm.
the stuff that you post is super impressive, and I'm always so blown away by like not just your body, but the body's capabilities in general. Like seeing people doing these like really amazing things with their bodies
Mhm.
is phenomenal.
I
Um,
think you share that. I share that with you. Is like I'm just
mhm,
fascinated with what people can do, and sometimes
mhm,
it's extreme. Like I could never do some of these people, the things that these people are doing, but it's
mhm.
so inspiring to watch.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's definitely a strong motivator to help you like in giving you the drive to pursue that, even if you may feel like oh like maybe it's not something that I can obtain within my lifetime. It still gives me something to kind of shoot for. Like for me, like for example, like trying to train the one arm handstand. Like I don't know if I'll ever be able to get it within my lifetime, but like it's fun to attempt and to kind of get those
Mm.
like little milestones here and there with like the
Oh yeah,
realization of like my body alignment. So that's always pretty cool.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
think that's something I never thought I would ever be able to sit on my own head, in like a chest stand. But here
Yeah.
I am, I really never believed that that would happen for me, especially because I
Hmm.
started contortion so late, and then
Hmm.
it's happened in the last year,
Hmm.
um, a relatively short amount of time in the realm of like how long people train contortion. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
it's
super
been
impressive.
thank you.
Yeah,
It's been
super, super
really fun.
impressive. Yeah.
Hmm.
Awesome. Awesome. So what would you say is like some of the things or some of the valuable lessons that you've learned from each of those modalities that you've been exposed to over the years?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
The big lessons. Oh, okay. I was just thinking about this last week. So
Mm-hmm.
in sharing, and I think that this is applicable to many formats, but in Zumba,
Mm-hmm.
there's a tendency, or within any dance format, I would say, there's a fine line between, kind of like I always say to my fellow Zumba instructors, like don't sell them short. Don't sell your
Mm-hmm.
students short. They'll always surprise you with what they're
Mm-hmm.
capable of. So give them the option. If they want it, they'll take it. And if they don't want it, whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
that's their choice, and you give that option to them. The other
Mm-hmm.
hand, though, is connection over complication. That would be like I think a key, especially if you're trying to build like a student base. It's
Mm-hmm.
so much more about um, creating opportunities for success. I think if a
Mm-hmm.
student comes into my class and right off the bat they feel like they're overwhelmed and they can't do it and none of this stuff is available to them, why would they ever come back?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would they tell anybody? They would just feel like, this isn't for me, and maybe fitness isn't for me, where otherwise this could be a really nourishing and expansive thing that they could
Mm-hmm.
be diving into. And not
Yeah.
only that, but like they have the opportunity to make a lot of really supportive connections in that room. I
Mm-hmm.
love to build community in my
Mm-hmm.
classrooms, and so I think there's and again, this is, I guess, more from the perspective of like, how do I grow my numbers? How do I foster
Mm-hmm.
connection? It's always
Mm-hmm.
that over complication.
Mm. I love
Um,
that.
yeah, it's again a fine line. Like I can always throw in that little step, and then in hindsight, I might go, "Oh, that didn't work."
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
um, but most of the time, it's like pointing to the person in the back of the room and being like, I saw that.
Mm-hmm.
I saw what you
Yeah.
did, and that was
Yeah.
awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's see, it's just little stuff like that. Or
Mm-hmm.
knowing that a particular student, I do this a lot with my older ladies. They love the older music. And so
Okay.
I'll
Yeah.
play that for them and I'll just throw them a little wink, but they love it. And then they bring their
Yeah.
friends and it's so great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but then that's true in like yoga. That's true for boot camp.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to me that everything that I do is accessible to any body. Um,
Mm.
and simply for the reason that I'm sure you probably agree. There's so many times that people say, well, I couldn't possibly do it because of this one bad experience that I had where, my knees hurt and they didn't give me anything. They just didn't have any option B.
Right.
Or I can't touch my toes. What's my next option? How can I get
Mm-hmm.
there? What's the middle place? Anyway, and so yeah, I think teaching to the room and the person in the back, that's who
Mm.
I'm always teaching to.
Right. And I've seen some of your Zumba videos as well. I couldn't find any recently, but I saw them like long time ago.
Mm,
Just the energy that you deliver in your performance, like when you're moving, you're moving and grooving, and I love that. I love seeing that energy. Um, and I guess it speaks to what you're saying in terms of like, speaking to the people in the back, right, and making sure that
mm-hmm.
they're heard and they're not that they're being left out in that regard. How does that energy kind of differ in comparison to like Zumba and let's say your capoeira practice, or when you're teaching people
Mm,
yoga or other modalities, right? Like how do they differ?
yeah. That's a good question too.
Hmm.
Um, but it's, Zumba dance formats, a lot of times I'll teach in a nonverbal way. So for me, it's a question of how can I be very, very clear? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
how am I delivering this in a way that goes, wait, we're going here next?
Mm-hmm.
Verbally, I have the chance to say, all right, now we're going to this place and then Rosa, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Physically, I have to get there, maybe 4 or 8 counts before they get there, because it's going to take
Mm-hmm.
their bodies a second to slow down and change, switch gears.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm always thinking a measure ahead
Oh,
of the
wow.
music. Yeah, so I practice a lot of like, okay, I'm already doing this move before we get to that right side. They already
Mm-hmm.
know where we're going.
Yeah.
But, in yoga, it's a lot of like, in a moment, we're going to stay here for 5 breaths. In a moment, we'll be moving again. But, sometimes, and there have been many, many times over like my career doing this, where I, in hindsight, will think, oh, they didn't connect what was
Mm-hmm.
going on. And it's not their fault that they didn't understand what I was saying. It was my fault. My cue was not clear enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's my responsibility to then go home and assess what language that I can use to improve,
Mm-hmm.
and or what movements could be more like easily interpreted.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like, I want to be, not that it's like about me, I think it's about them, but it is my
Mm-hmm.
job to facilitate a really great experience. It's my job to help them bridge the gap between overwhelm and, I want them to feel challenged but not overwhelmed. I
Right.
want them to feel successful but not bored.
Mm-hmm.
And so to do that between different formats is always the homework, I think.
Right.
Yeah, and with capoeira, it's even more difficult because you're speaking a completely different language.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I guess because of there's you definitely do see the energy shift, and like to your point, it's like you're going through like the teaching style is a lot different, right? I
Mm-hmm.
feel, right, like what you were just saying in terms of like with Zumba, you have to be a couple steps ahead, keeping
Mm-hmm.
the environment, the energy really high, whereas with yoga it's more of a, you literally have a chance to breathe, and like, you know
Mm-hmm.
with that being said, is like, so do you find that your cues less are more effective if they're less verbal and more of like giving physical cues, or is it kind of like a case by case where like some people are more receptive to like the more tangible, like the jargon, versus like being more in your body and like actually like
Mm.
in emphasizing on those like physical cues?
Interesting. Yeah, I think
Mhm.
that um, uh, a lot of, and I'll give yoga as an example here, and this is
Mhm.
true for capoeira too, because depending
Mhm.
on the school that you're learning from, they may be calling the same thing different names.
Right.
Um, and so in yoga, for example, there's a lot of jargon and there's a lot of like language that somebody off the street might not have any idea what a chaturanga is. So how are
Yeah.
you going to deliver that? And so I think whenever I'm helping a newer teacher, I'm saying like, try just taking that off the table. Deliver
Mhm.
the cues without worrying about what name, what pose this is. Like, just tell them where to go and what to do with their body first.
Mhm. Right.
Um, and so for me, and I like to speak in metaphor. I do that all the time. I speak in
Yeah.
metaphor and movie quotes. And
Yeah.
so,
Awesome.
yeah. And so I'm always talking about, you know, as if you're pulling the navel up with a grappling hook. What does that feel
Mhm.
like? If I'm
Mhm.
stretching myself like taffy in 2 directions, how does that feel? And
Right.
so I think that that's a lot more helpful, because we, as long as we have an idea of what that is, we can create that sensation in the body or know what to
Mhm.
look for. Um, there's, let's see, what's another one that I give? Oh, I love to give the cue to pretend that the energy is moving out through the hairline like a unicorn horn. And that always
Ah,
happens, this
yeah.
lengthening through the neck that kind of happens in a
Mhm.
natural tilt of the head.
Right.
Things like that I love to do, because it feels like, oh, well, that makes sense to me now, even though I've not ever seen a unicorn
Yeah.
other than on TV.
Yeah.
But like, but those things work all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Or in Cobra, for example, I'll always give the cue to lift and pull the head back, squish the head as if you're trying to bring your head between your legs, as if the legs
Mm-hmm.
are just, or excuse me, as if the head is going to be just resting between the thighs, and so
Gotcha.
everybody kind of has this lift and curling action that they do, and there's this lengthening that happens as well, because it's easy to say,
Mm.
well, just put your head back, just back bend, sure, why
Right.
don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a lot more effective to give that cue, because then they kind of naturally flare the ribs up, the shoulders come back,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. I love
So
that. As a visual learner, I really appreciate when somebody like a teacher can create, like, paint that image for me, and then all I have to do is kind of like envision that in my head. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm with you. I know what I need to be feeling, or I know what the movement is supposed to look like. So yeah,
mm,
I find that
yeah.
to be very effective, because I think as a teacher, you also have to kind of read the room and see what people's their, like, how they learn, how like what their learning style is like, right? Because some people are more kinetic learners, where they
Mm,
need physical, like, touch in order for them to kind of have an understanding of what they need to be feeling and where. Whereas some people are more visual, where they need to be like what you're describing, like they need to see the image in their head and equate
mhm.
it to something that resonates with them, and then they can make that connection, be like, oh, okay, I got it, I know what I'm supposed to do, right? And then some people
Yeah,
are theoretical, and they want more of like the tangible, like, give it to me, like, give me the verbiage, that's how I learn, right? So
right. Step
yeah.
your foot forward, right foot
Yeah.
forward, back foot flat, or whatever
Yeah.
cue you're trying to give.
Exactly.
It's an
Exactly.
interesting balance, I think. There's which over the years I wasn't always flexible, but and I wasn't
Hmm.
always strong, but that's what people see now. And so I have to
Hmm.
be very careful uh, to try to demonstrate when it's appropriate, because some people need that to kind of attach
Hmm.
their ideas of like, oh, it might look like this,
Hmm.
but not to uh, discourage them from believing that they
Yeah.
could do that, you know?
Right. Right. Do
Anyway.
you get that a lot in terms of, speaking on discouraging? Do you get that a lot from people who maybe like follow you for the first time, and then like want to take a class, but then they're like apprehensive because they see you doing all these like crazy back bends and stuff, and like, oh
Oh,
man, I
yeah.
could never do that. She's too advanced for me, kind of thing. Like, how do you how do
I
you
get that all
how
the
do you deal with
time.
that? Yeah, yeah, I get that quite
Yeah.
a lot too. So how do you personally deal with that?
I don't like it's interesting because it's hard to convey on social media like, well, yeah, I had two kids in the middle of that. This has been spanning for me over 10 years.
Hmm.
Um, and so I like to give that because, in the midst of that, there's life challenges and injury and
Hmm.
you learning on your own versus learning with a coach, etc. But giving that kind of like photographic feedback, I don't do it super
Hmm.
often.
Hmm.
But to get those old pictures and say like, whoa, this was me in 2009 or
Hmm.
whenever this
Hmm.
was versus where I am now. And like, I want people to believe that they have the potential to do it. Maybe they don't
Hmm.
ever sit on their head, but that wasn't ever within the realm of possibility for me before. Why couldn't
Hmm.
it be for someone else?
Right.
Um, you know,
That's
yeah.
awesome. I love that. Speaking of social media, I remember, I think it was recently, you made a post speaking to something to the effect of imposter syndrome, which
Mm,
really resonated with me as well, because as a health coach, and also a student of movement, I sometimes get in my head a little bit, and I suffer from that imposter syndrome from time to time. So how do you, like, how do you cope with that? How, like, what are some of your strategies, whether it's certain rituals or like mantras or anything of that nature, that you like, how do you cope with that imposter syndrome?
that's I would say that's like my biggest hurdle, to be honest.
Mm. Mhm.
Uh, I the negative self talk is constant, and I think that that's
Mhm.
maybe a misunderstanding that because I'm showing myself on social media and because I try to be as open as I can, that I must be so confident. And yeah, that's a work in progress, right? Like, I think that has, one of the maybe unexpected consequences of posting on social media was I feel much more comfortable seeing myself and hearing myself now. I do feel, more confident in what I'm posting and trusting in my voice. But it's not without its doubt. There's constantly the tapes kind of going in my head. And so it's trust, yes. Trust that I like to call it like my medicine, the ways that the unique thing that every individual has that only they can do. I think that that's what their medicine is. And trusting that my medicine is needed somewhere. And maybe there's someone like me. And thankfully, I've had that validated many times over the years as I've been posting that what I said hit someone at an opportune time. And sometimes, as you probably know, speaking on social media, posting on social media sometimes feels like you're speaking into a void. And so to be working through it constantly is like, first of all, there's little to lose. If not me, then who? And I know that at least from my perspective, is I would have loved to see someone with, fill in the blank, like someone who's starting later in life, someone who is a parent or someone who has a body or an appearance like mine, someone who has a similar lived experience to me. I want that. I want to see myself mirrored. I think that's like a lot of why we admire the people that we admire, whether it's like a movie star or an athlete or whatever. I think that that's why we fixate or admire a particular person. I think RuPaul says this as well, is because we see them, we see an aspect of ourselves in them.
Right.
And so I think that, not that I, do anything really incredible.
Don't sell yourself short, man. Like you do a lot of great stuff, man. I'm not just saying it just to say it because you're on the show. Like, I'm genuinely a fan, like of the words that you write, the stuff that you post, and your authenticity and transparency, right? It's like, especially when I saw that post about like imposter syndrome, and I'm just like, man, her too, like that's crazy.
Oh,
It's like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Because like from the outside looking in, if you just saw like the highlight stuff, right? Like your highlight reel, it's like, no, this girl's got it figured out. She's got beautiful kids, she's got a nice family, she's this and that, and then you actually read the context behind it, and it's like, oh well, like she's a human being at the end of the day, right? And she's having an experience, and that experience may not always be pleasant, and that's what you're showcasing, right?
Yeah,
and
I really believe that.
yeah.
Especially, I mean, it intersects, I think, in many of the realms that I operate in, but there's a lot of, in particularly fitness and like martial arts, there's a lot of like this no days off, kind of like, if you don't show up 100%, then you're a failure, or you're failing yourself, or all of this kind of the reinforcing ideas that if you can't make it 100% of the time, if you can't do it 100% right, then it's your failing. You just didn't have what it took. I hate that mentality. There's so little flexibility and so little room for grace. And so, and that grace I extend to myself many times, because many times I just don't post the things, or I post them and then maybe I take them down later because I've learned, and maybe I don't feel so good about having said that thing that I said 5 years ago or whatever. I'm not the same person that I was then.
Right.
So I have to extend myself that same grace. And anyway, I think it's so important to allow for like the full spectrum of, the multidimensionality that we as humans can hold. It just wouldn't be honest otherwise.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And that's why that's why I thoroughly respect what you do on social media, and the, like I said, the authenticity, the realism behind your posts, and what, and the message that you convey is so enriching. And it's there's no fluff with your shit, is what I'm trying to
Thank
get
you.
at, right? Like I often
Sometimes
see
there's
a
fluff.
lot of, I mean, I
A little
don't
bit.
see it that way, but I mean, maybe, like, I mean, we're always our own worst critic.
Mm,
But
okay,
like,
that's fair.
you know what I mean? So it's like you may see it that way, but then for someone else, when they're reading your content, it's like, man, that fucking hits home. Like the imposter syndrome hit for me. Like, and a lot of the times, like, some of your other posts will strike a chord with me too. And I'm just like, it makes me think. And I very much appreciate content like that. And it's not just about someone's highlight reel or them hiding behind. And by all means, like, it's their prerogative. They don't have to, you never have to showcase or air your dirty laundry or anything like that. It's your business. You can do with it what you want. But I think sometimes we get too comfortable with hiding behind this facade,
Mm,
this painting this picture that's not the real you, and it's often inauthentic. And then it paints
absolutely.
a false image out into the public figure, and now people are trying to obtain something that's not real versus connecting with people that are just like them, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never want to stray away from that. I think at all
Mm-hmm.
times, and I wonder how you feel about this too, because in learning, in working in fitness, in working, doing what I do outside of the realm of fitness, although they kind of
Mm-hmm.
intersect for me,
Mm-hmm.
um, you get to feeling and people start to trust you. They believe you to be a very safe space, and I think that that's sacred ground for me. I never want to discourage someone who came into my space and allowed themselves to be vulnerable in order to like
Mm-hmm.
strengthen and expand themselves,
Mm-hmm.
to then be like, I actually only wanted this piece of you but not the rest.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's really important to me to allow as much space as I can for that, for myself and
Mm-hmm.
my students too.
Right.
It's odd how many times after something as silly as like a Zumba class, silly from the outside, I should say, someone standing outside would see a lot of like single, double, uh,
Mm-hmm.
hand waving and whooping. But
Mm-hmm.
it's so funny because after those classes, I've had people come up and share extremely vulnerable things,
Oh
um,
wow.
and trust me with what's happening in their life. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
um, there's no coincidence. I created a safe space for them to come and be, and
Mm-hmm.
without judgment or anything like that. And then, that door is open now
Oh,
for
for
them.
sure. Yeah, because I mean, movement in general is medicine, right? It's like it can be so therapeutic and cathartic for a lot of people, and they don't realize, because it's just energy moving within your body, right? And so a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the times when you get that movement, and like, especially in a Zumba class, and based off of the way that you're explaining it, it's like it allows a person to just be free. And when you're operating at a high level, a high frequency, that resonance carries over into your students, and then now they start to feel that, and they're like, oh fuck it, I'm gonna just let loose and, like,
Yeah,
do my thing, you know what I mean? And then, like, because I
it's so
see,
true.
like, when I used to like work out in the gyms, and like they'd have like the Zumba classes, and these, like, there'd be like elder ladies, and they're getting it, like they're just like, they don't give a fuck,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? They're just like
Yeah.
moving their bodies, and it's like, I love seeing that, because I'm just like, yo, okay, go ahead, granny, like, get, do your thing,
Yeah, my
right?
older
So,
ladies just like they lead the
oh
way.
yeah.
Uh, Especially when it's like a bunch of younger women, and maybe they're in their
Mhm.
teens, maybe they're in their early 20s or something, but they're so paralyzed of
Mm.
uh, moving their bodies, and so it's
Yeah.
kind of this wall that they break against once they see these
Mhm.
women who
Yeah.
just, yeah, they probably just don't give a fuck anymore. Like they've
Yeah.
seen enough that they're just like, everybody is going to be having their opinions. I may as well do what I
Right.
want. And
Yeah.
they're the ones who lead the way, which is so
Yeah.
fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So are you still teaching Zumba, or not as much anymore?
I did. I've taught it for a long time. That's like the first
Mhm.
format I certified in, and now I teach it just once a week.
Okay.
I feel like I can give more that way.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I've toyed around with maybe doing online. Everything is so saturated. I think everybody is doing
Mhm.
online now since the
Mhm.
pandemic. And so I
Mhm.
struggled to know whether I would be lost or whether I could successfully do it.
Mm.
So,
Well, I think if you have a loyal following, because for me, I feel like it's there comes a point where people no longer subscribe to classes; they subscribe to people.
that's
Meaning
true.
that, like, it's like a personality, right? It's like you can have two people teaching the exact same yoga or the exact same Zumba class, but the energy is just off. The energy isn't the
Mm,
same for
hmm.
person A versus person B. And so it's like, you pick and choose based off of personality, I feel,
I
you
think
know?
that that's so true
Yeah.
for me too. Um, they want a particular energy, and I can
Hmm.
give that too, or I
Yeah,
can
of
try and
course.
mimic it. I'll teach
Yeah.
cycle, for example, is like one that I
Hmm.
I laugh about all the time because I can teach
Hmm.
it. It's just
Hmm.
not my format because
Hmm.
cycle people are intense.
Yeah.
I'm too silly for
Yeah.
cycle. They
Yeah.
have these voices like, if you don't challenge it, then you won't change it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, you can do it if you want to, or you don't
Yeah.
have to. I like my energy is not quite what they're looking for, and that's fine.
Yeah.
They can
Yeah.
have their instructor and that energy.
Mhm.
They can do it better than I could.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, I relate to that as well because I tend to be very silly in my classes too. So I'm not
yeah.
the typical drill sergeant type of trainer or fitness instructor. Like I like to crack jokes and like make things light, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
I'm very playful in my classes and I like to just have fun. So yeah.
Yeah, I
Some
love a
people,
terrible joke,
yeah. Yeah. Oh
especially in
yeah.
a serious yoga class, because people are just,
Yeah. Oh
it's the
yeah.
irony of being in a yoga class. Like, we're all supposed to be in here chilling out, and everybody's
Yeah.
so serious.
Yeah.
So,
Life is too
yeah,
short not to have fun, right? So
amen to that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you also mentioned something in regards to you have your fitness side and then you have stuff outside of fitness that kind of interwoven together. I know you also do tarot card reading as well. Am
Mhm.
I saying that right? I don't want
Yeah, you are.
okay.
Tarot cards.
Um
Mhm.
so explain that world to me because I mean I'm very much into the spiritual world and I'm into all of that, you know what I mean? But I haven't delved into a lot of the other like the deeper side of it, like crystals and the
Mm.
readings and stuff like that. So I'm curious because I've seen it pop up quite a bit now, like over social media, and
Mhm.
like I'm very
Yeah, it's
fascinated by that
exploded.
whole world. Yeah, yeah. So walk
Um
me through that.
So tarot cards, they're just a method of divination, which is,
Hmm.
using a tool to kind of mirror back to you the energy that you already have, or in my case, because I read for other people, I would use
Hmm.
the cards, and they are, they're getting that energy mirrored back to them. So it's my
Hmm.
responsibility to just tell them what I see,
Hmm.
tell them the mirror, and do the best that I can to. Some people aren't very, uh, they don't reveal what's going on for them personally, which is completely
Hmm.
fine. Not my job, But
Yeah.
uh, to convey to them, like whatever chaos might be going on. A lot of people come to me as a tarot card reader because they're looking for clarity.
Mm.
Um, so to and a lot of times, all that's needed is for me to say it out loud back to them, for them to go, oh yeah, that makes sense, I'll go
Mhm.
and do this.
Mhm.
um, it comes from uh, a lot of, I'm a professional witch, I'll say it that way.
I was actually gonna
um,
get into that too, yeah. I'm curious about that because I noticed it on your Instagram handle.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
title that I've said, but kind of sometimes struggle to know how to deliver it because it's a very niche thing what I do.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
Um, and crystals are great. They're a wonderful tool as well. But if you are, as I am, more of like an animist person, which is to say that you believe that everything has energy, everything is alive, then it's really easy to just, use anything that's lying around. I, use the rocks in my garden all the time. They don't have to be, they're not more special because they're sparkly.
Okay.
So that's my approach. And the way that it intersects with my fitness practice is kind of what I touched on earlier, which is I notice this energy and watch people's individual journeys as they're kind of competing with themselves. A lot of times in a format like Zumba, it's like, why can't I just let go? Why can't I just like move? Because they're kind of working through how vulnerable it is to be seen by other people, in order to let go of this kind of idea of perfectionism. And so, it happens too in a lot of different spaces where Capoeira, for example, they'll just mimic what they see, when the truest expression, like when you've got it, it's more because it's you expressing your particular body, your particular energy, your flavor, if you will. And so I noticed these energies and started to kind of reverse engineer them, where like, how can I manipulate the energy in a room so that I can create like a lesson or an intention, and vice versa, right? Like if I notice that there's a lot of tension in the room, then I might use a particular movement or a particular type of breath to release that energy. And that happens a lot in yoga. Yoga spaces are so interesting that way. I've learned a lot. People get like angry a lot in yoga spaces. And so when I notice it, I'll try to do the best that I can to give it name, and then just to kind of sit with it, be like in relationship to that anger, and then let it go. And anyway, it's a really powerful thing. I think it's something I'm sure you've noticed probably watching individuals or even just collectives. It's really interesting how we all kind of feed off that energy too.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think my takeaway from it is like, I often will, in terms of like energy, like I often tell my clients, like your emotions aren't right or wrong. It's just energy. It's what you do with that energy, right? Because you can either use that energy for creation or you can use it for destruction, right? So like anger oftentimes is grouped as this like negative emotion, right?
Yeah.
But it's not the anger itself. It's more so anger in terms of what you do with that anger. Because I can be angry for, and then, someone disses me and I go and I punch them in the face because they made me angry, right? Or I can be angry and stand up for myself, and use that anger as a way of like, or even a better example, right? Anger in terms of right and wrong, in terms of what you do with it, is the difference between, a riot and a rally. You know what I mean? Like a riot is very destructive, right? You're out there and you're destroying, like you're creating anarchy and chaos. Whereas a rally, you're still using that anger, but you're trying to deliver a message, right? And you're using it in a creative and informative way. And so that's kind of how I view it in terms of like, it's not about right and wrong energy. It's about what you do with that energy. And like, yeah, like release it for sure. 100%. I'm a firm believer in that. And then also using that energy for creation, right? It's like when you look at a songwriter who's gotten their heart broken, they use that hurt to write their music, right? And then they release that energy by giving it out into the world. So now that pain no longer belongs to them. It belongs to the world, right? It's like, I'm sharing my pain for anyone who felt this at this point in time. And, that's kind of how I view it.
Absolutely. I mean, Fleetwood Mac is a great example of that. I was just listening to them earlier today. It's like now we've created this thing out of the tumult that we felt, out of the resentment and the rage and, all the different kind of faces that anger can take on. and now we've created this thing that is so cathartic for people. And now not only can they feel their grief, but they can alchemize it into something like healing. They can get to the other side of anger, which is, grief, oftentimes, or, whatever it is. It might be shame, it might be X, Y, or Z, but like to process through that big emotion is one of my favorite things, actually, about body work. I would say, like, a lot of friends of mine who work in like massage, for instance, know it very, very well. They're working out those knots, and they're privy to a lot of the conversations even that happen in those spaces. They get to be the holder for it.
Absolutely. So, yeah. So I want to touch on you being what was it, a witch, a certified witch? Is that what it is? Or
not certified.
Or like but okay, so how does one become a witch? And more so, what are some of the because I'm sure there's a lot of misconceptions in regards to what we see in being portrayed in the media versus what an actual witch is. So can you walk me through or explain that a little bit more in terms of what being a witch is all about?
Well, everybody has their own flavor to it, so I'll give you mine, but this isn't like in any way answer for everyone.
Right.
To be a witch, I think, is to be in tune with the light side and the healing, but also with the grit, and not being afraid to really get into the darker aspects of magic, which is kind of what we touched on before with, like, how can I alchemize this rage into something beautiful and productive? Or what is my aim? Maybe my aim is to hurt, that some people do practice magic in that vein. So I would say that that's what distinguishes a witch from like an energy worker or a shaman, where they tend to kind of move in what they call light working. So working specifically with like light energy in order to like move towards healing. A witch doesn't necessarily believe that one is better than the other, but one can have be really autonomous with what they want. They are a co-creator, and so that's how they view it, with however they want to operate. So for some people, and again, depends on like what branch of witchcraft you decide to practice in. But some people practice with kind of communing with the dead. Some people work, like me, with movement and transmuting and working towards or backwards, say, for instance, in like inner child work and holding the pain bodies that we hold. That's my particular vein. And there's other stuff. Some people break hexes for a living. Some people only do the divination. And so you can do a lot underneath that umbrella. And so there's not like really a certification process. It is like I can look back into my past and say, I think I was here all along. I was just calling it different things over the years.
I see. Okay. Interesting. And are there any like for someone who would want to get into witchcraft or become a witch, is there any precautions, or like what are some of the potential risks in dealing with this kind of powerful energy?
I have lots of cautionary tales, but I'll maybe that's a podcast for another day. What I would say is to immerse yourself in information. If possible, learn from someone who's been doing this a while. They will be much more they'll take it much more seriously. There's always kind of the things that you hear and you don't really know why. One example is like you don't want to take a picture of your spell work. You don't want to share exactly what you're doing. And the reason why is that, someone might be working against you. And so the idea is that you do it not in secret, but like, in the safe space that you've created in your own home or wherever you're working your spells. Or I would say that to be very aware and specific with what you're doing. I like to give this analogy a lot because I think this is one that we all know from pop culture, which is the Ouija board. And, we see that all the time. I think even on the box, it used to be like this thing that you would do at sleepovers or something.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. But the idea is that the Ouija board itself isn't the problem. It's that we go knocking and saying, is anyone there? And then anyone will answer. And so it is to be specific, to have discernment and, and then just to like learn as much as you possibly can. Don't stop at this, Tumblr pages where I used to learn a lot. Don't
throwing it back.
Go find books, but also like, look in places that you wouldn't think. Look at like foraging books, look at medicinal books, look at herbalists, look at, the history of midwifery, like whatever corner you want to explore. There's, tons of places you could go. And mine just happened to be, there's an author named Carlos Castañeda who did, he was like very involved with shamans in Mexico, and through his kind of journey with plant medicine, psychoactive plants. I almost said psychoactive pants, not psychoactive pants.
That might be a thing someday. So
well, who knows? It's 2021. So he went and did for many years. He studied under a shaman down in Mexico to become a man of knowledge, is what they called it. And so that's what it is. And so he has a book called like Magical Passes, which is the physically how we can activate energy around us and using particular movements and things like that. And that informs a lot of what I do as well, but that's not all that I do. So a lot of it has been through troubleshooting. A lot of it has been through learning how to manipulate energy on my own and helping people do that.
That's fascinating to me. Like
doing breath work does a lot.
Yeah.
Oh
it's
yeah.
all about, like, moving that energy, right?
Oh yeah. Like how breath, even if you're just doing like a simple, any lifting pattern, right? Like using an exhale in a particular place or using an inhale in a particular place produces a different kind of result. Or breathing this way on a treadmill or anything like that. It just produces like different effects. And so for me, learning how to use the breath to either amplify or dim down the energy. And that's been super interesting. In fact, when I am not very clear on what I'm working with, when I have a client, for example, to do energy work for them, if I can tell they're really stuck and really like not allowing me to see, I'll ask them if it's okay to try this particular breath. And so I'll have them do a particular breath, and it immediately opens up. Like it bursts through this whatever bubble that they were holding everything down in, and it's like putting salt on something. It just elevates whatever flavor is already there.
Right.
And so, yeah. And then we can really get working.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Once you align the breath, then everything like falls into place, and you can just kind of work from that space. Yeah. So it sounds like you deal with a lot of people with all the awesome work that you're doing, and you're basically you're a healer, right? I mean, that's that could be one of your many labels that you wear, or many hats that you wear, rather.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So how does that come back to you in terms of like, how do you take care of Angie? You taking care
Mm,
of other people, but how do you cater to yourself and provide self-love or healing for yourself?
mm. It is to be uh, very accountable and practice
Mm,
radical honesty, because I
mm,
love to give, and I give very openly and freely.
mhm,
And at times, I think it's a gift that I have, but I also think that it can work against me in many regards, where it's often
mhm,
that I'm giving more than I have,
mhm,
and I don't have enough for the people that I need to be present for, like my kids. Um,
mhm,
so the way that I give back to myself is to uh, often it's this is kind of maybe an unexpected answer, but it's
mhm,
eating,
mhm,
and I think that's one of the most intuitive ways that we can ground ourselves.
mhm,
Um, and I guess depending on the coach, I think that often we go for long stretches of time without eating substantially, because we need to be
mhm,
moving. It's not comfortable
mhm,
being full, and when you're trying to like demonstrate things and so forth. And so for me, it's just sitting down and allowing myself to just eat what feels good to me, the things that I love, and I would say that that's like a pleasure that I really indulge in. Um,
mhm.
and it is also like liking things without inhibiting myself. I think I did that a lot when I was younger, because I thought it was like
Mhm,
not cool to like certain
mhm,
things.
mhm.
Um, and so now it's like I do like
Give me an
this music, and
example.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
dance.
Okay. Yeah.
Like I was a real hipster. I hung out with a lot of
Mhm.
hipster kids when I was in my teens,
Yeah.
and so it wasn't cool to like this music. I couldn't like reggaeton when I was a teen, because we were too busy liking Bjork. But and so now it's kind of silly, because I'm like, dang, why couldn't I like that and that? Like, it didn't make
Right.
me less cool, but for some
Yeah.
reason it did. It mattered to me
Mhm. Yeah.
to kind of like prove something to these
Mhm.
people. And so now it's like I don't have to prove anything to these people.
Mhm.
I think I'm cool. So
Mhm.
regardless of what anybody else thinks, I'm going to be, jamming over here to my corny ass music, and
Yeah.
not giving a damn, dance
Mhm.
like an
Yeah.
idiot in my kitchen, dancing like an idiot
Mhm.
on stage, and hopefully that, I'm doing it for me, but I'm hoping that someone maybe, gets the permission to also be as silly and also just be whoever they are and not give a damn.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally. Yeah. And
that's how
again,
I
that's what I
feed my
meant
heart.
by, yeah, and that's what I meant by your authenticity, right? Because you exude that a lot, like in your posts. Like I can tell that you have. I see it a lot in your stories. Like
Thank you.
you have a very interesting sense of humor that I like, and you make a lot of really good references to certain things. I'm like, I've seen that movie. I know what I get the reference, right? so
Yeah, I
so
know
I
you like the references.
yeah, yeah, I always appreciate a good reference. So like yeah, so thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. And no, I'm right there with you in terms of, being free to like be more open and like certain things, right? I think that like that's part of it is has to do with age. Like when we were younger, growing up in like high school, like regardless of whether you were associated with a hipster or just you were part of the it crowd, you felt this confinement to you know liking certain things and not being allowed to like other things. You know what I mean? It wasn't cool
Mhm.
to rock certain clothes or to like certain things or to watch certain things. And if you wanted to be considered one of the popular kids, then you had to abide by those rules. And then
Mhm.
you get to a point in your life where you're like, that was dumb. Why did I spend all that energy like hiding in secret of like liking certain things and like, I forget who said it, but it was something to the effect of like, I don't believe in guilty pleasures. I don't want to be I
Mm.
don't want to feel guilty for the things that I like, so fuck guilty pleasures. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
I
I
like that.
wholeheartedly agree with that. So I stopped using the phrase guilty pleasures. Like I just like I like it. I don't care what you think.
It's
I'm
just
not going to feel guilty about it.
yeah, it's just pleasure, and my life is too damn short to be living
Yeah.
under these rules, and they're arbitrary anyway, because this
Yeah.
person might think that's really cool, and this person over here might think, in the same group might think that that's bullshit. So
Yeah.
I'm going to live life on my own terms, really. And
Yeah.
hopefully, I think that was a really interesting piece too. I was part of this event called the Wild Women Symposium some years back, and I was event planning for, there was like a party one night, and I was in charge of organizing that. And everything was going really well. It was, quite a big range of ages in that event. There were women kind of ranging from, 18 all the way up. I think our oldest attendee was maybe 90 or somewhere in her 90s. But there was a moment where if I could turn back time by Cher came on, and I was like, oh my God, this is my jam. Like, this is so fun. And I put a microphone up I decorated like Aerosmith, because I was like, I want somebody to go in and just like feel like this floor is theirs. And so they did. And that was just like exactly what I wanted to create.
That's
and
amazing.
So I got out there, I was jamming, because Cher is another idol of mine. And so I was out there, and then an observation that someone else made the next morning was like, oh my gosh, I love how willing to be seen you are. And it didn't occur to me at all that I was doing anything I was just having fun finally, because it was all this work that I'd put into this thing. And it was a real moment of fulfillment for me, but I wasn't caring about what anything else in that moment. But someone else saw it and made that observation to me in hindsight. And I think that was a really pivotal moment for me of, whatever silliness might ensue, someone else is potentially looking at that from the outside and thinking, I wish I could do that. Well, you fucking can. You just have to do it. And hopefully that gives somebody permission. I think that influences a lot of the way that I work on social media too.
I guess you never really truly know how you're going to be perceived when you're being truthful in the moment, and I think that's part of the point in being fully transparent and just allowing yourself to be free. Is like, you're not caring, you just don't care, you don't give a fuck, and you're just allowing yourself to be your true self. And as a result, I feel like, to your point of using your example, like, I feel like that person saw themselves in you, similar to how, like, you were saying how, like, when we idolize certain people, like, it's because we see ourselves in that person. I think that was the moment for you. And so that's another reason why I say don't downplay your effect on the world, because you never know who's watching and who's inspired by you.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to do it maybe for me, also just hoping that something, my medicine is, I'm delivering my medicine to those who need it. And I hope that everyone, truly, I hope that that's what everyone gets to do at some point in their life, is just to believe in the magic that they have inside, and in whatever form they deliver it, that they find the courage to do it.
Absolutely. Well, Angie, we're coming up on time, so I want to ask you one final question, and then I'm going to kind of leave the floor open for you to kind of shout out any projects that you're working on, or anything that you want to, give credit to. But the show is basically, it's in its working stage in terms of the title, but I'm working on it being Find Flow. And so I ask all my guests, how do you define flow, and how do you find it within your life?
Oh, so how do I find flow? It's always a balancing act, like when you're standing on one foot, it's never quite as static as I think people want it to be or think it should be. It's never perfect stillness. It's always kind of fluctuating and counterbalancing and reassessing and all of that stuff. So for me, that's a hugely important piece. But to find alignment is that's what I believe flow feels like, is aligning myself with the truth of who I believe to be in my integrity. It's very easy to know who I am and how I operate if I can always come back to, this is the truth of who I am. And then suddenly everything becomes clear. If this is the person that I am, then would I behave this way in this particular instance? No. Or yes, and that has never steered me wrong. And that alignment, I think, has allowed me to trust in whatever's coming next. Even though I don't always have a plan, I don't like to white knuckle my future. And so I just work in being in alignment. If I'm in alignment, I believe that whatever blessings or, things are coming my way, I'll be able to catch it.
Beautiful.
No matter, if we're talking like sports analogy, maybe then, somebody's throwing something at you and you're not aligned. It doesn't matter how good of a catcher you are, you're never going to find it.
Right.
So you have to be poised for the opportunities.
Hitting us with the metaphors yet again. I love it. I appreciate it. Amazing.
Well,
yeah,
me.
I love it. I love it. It resonates. So, Angie, I just want to thank you once again for joining me on the podcast and lending me your time. And honestly, like I said, I'm a big fan. I love what you're doing. Please continue
Likewise.
to. Thank you. I appreciate it. Please continue to keep spreading the message and being your true, authentic self and shining bright, so you give other people permission to do the same. Because honestly, you are such a huge influence, whether you realize it or not. I think what you're doing and what you represent, you're one of the genuine people that I follow, that I'm like, damn, man, like I have to get you on the podcast and just, showcase your stuff. And I didn't even get to ask you all the questions that I wanted to ask, but, it just gives us an opportunity to, stay in touch and maybe do this again. And I wish you all the best, and a lot of love, happiness, and success. And now I'm going to leave the floor open to you. If you want to drop anything, let us know what you're working on. Where can people find you? I'll have it all in the description, but the floor is yours.
Perfect. I'm currently working on a downloadable soundbite where people can work on what I'm calling spell work in motion. So it's the way that they can physically work through their blockages and then open the road to whatever it is, whether it's abundance or healing or there's going to be a couple of different offerings, but I'm hoping to offer that as a downloadable file so that people can do that in the privacy of their own home where they feel safe. And then, that's, I guess, the big thing that's on the horizon. That's what I'm kind of working towards now. But otherwise, people can find me. I'm usually on Instagram, and so that's where I always tell people to find me. It's BIRDGERHL, Bird Girl, like the song, and underscore, and an underscore underneath that. At Bird Girl _.
It'll be in the description too, so you guys can just click on that and But I always like people to shout it out and let people know where to find you. So
that's where you can find me. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much again, and thank you for everyone who is watching or listening at home. And all the best. Take care, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.